everyone. My name is Amol Kaveh. I head up product at Strong DM. And today we're going to talk about zero trust as used in privileged access management and why we think this new approach is really going to solve the critical issue of adoption in um, today's deployments of privileged access management and really increase the security and compliance of our customers and of adopters. So without further ado, a lot of us have been talking about least privilege and least standing privilege specifically, right? The ideal state for least privilege actually is giving you the privilege you need just when you need it. So when you enter into a system which is a privileged system, you want to be in a state where you have access to no resources, but can request access to any system to get your job done without the burden and frustration of long-winded processes to grant you access. What we hear from our customers is sometimes they request access, and by the time they actually get access, they've forgotten why they started. That's not the experience we want. That's not the experience that we deliver. What we deliver is really frustration-free access when you need it to get your job done. So in today's world, authorization really starts with at the start of a session and gives you free reign throughout your access pattern. So it's privileged access management, where they say, hey, I need to access the system. I go through authentication, and once I'm authenticated into the system, it's up to the system to enforce any requirements that are there. And I can do whatever I want. So I have access to the production database. I can issue a drop table command and delete the database because you know what? I was authorized to access the database and there were no additional controls that I put in, or adding those additional controls are so cumbersome that folks don't put those controls in. This obviously does not work in today's world where both the users are distributed and the access to resources and the location of distributed resources themselves are distributed. You can get hacked at any moment in time. Malware can take over your machine. You may supposedly have working hours and authorized access to system only during 9 to 5, but what's to stop you from accessing it at midnight and doing something nefarious? And then there are certain actions that are extremely privileged, that are extremely potentially dangerous to the system, that requires an extra level of buy-in. It's a particularly risky action, or it's an unusual action. It's an action that can have serious consequences to the enterprise. Those actions may require additional validation, either from a from somebody in security or from your manager. It's very hard to do today, and it's something that is very needed. This is what we hear from our customers today, and this is how we make it possible. So the way that our customers think about this, the way that we want to approach this is starting from zero trust as the foundation. There is strong authentication tied to the identity that a user presents themselves. And then you derive context, which can be static from the device the person's coming in from, when they're coming in from, the location they're coming in from, the IP address. These are all adding additional degrees of context to the flow, as well as context that you derive from the resource they're accessing potentially. What is the tag associated with the database you're accessing? What is the tag associated with the virtual machine that you're accessing? Is this production? Is this a test database where you have free reign? All of that is important in understanding what is the authorization for the actions you're about to do at a particular moment in time, right? Additionally, what we hear is really the need to potentially take external signals. You may have a threat feed of your own. You may have, like one of our customers, require that any access to production only be from users who've gone through the entire learning management system and are current on their security training and their compliance training. Uh, you may want to check that the access that's being granted is to someone who is current on their security training and compliance training. This all should be possible in the policy evaluation at runtime or the action you're about to perform. So the action is no longer about providing unfettered access to production. It's really about saying when you get access to production, it's what is required to get your job done and no more, right? All without adding a burden for the user to think about what credential are they using? Where are they storing the credential? Is this the credential that gives them access to production, or is this a credential that gives them access to a test database? So we call this continuous zero trust assessment. And from a concept perspective, this is really about evaluating every flow for all of the context around the user. This is integrating with the IDPs that a user has, that an enterprise has, to determine who's authenticated and how they've authenticated. Have they used security keys? Have they used a multi-factor authentication? All of that can be derived from the context. Trusting the device. Hey, the device is in a known good state, or the device is compromised, and we can get these signals from any of the EDR vendors that prevalent in most enterprises. We can do the endpoint verification to assess this device through these integrated signals from our partners, and then decode the actual protocol to derive what is the action that the user is about to perform. Is this action authorized for the user to perform? And then what is the context that it's coming in from? What is the location? What is the security of the device? What is the threat signals that we have say about the user access? And using all of this to derive a risk score as you access virtually anything. The one difference that is that I want to highlight is we don't require that the application be rewritten. Oftentimes, to adopt zero trust, step one, rewrite all your applications. For an enterprise that has been around for decades, if not centuries, and has several generations of software, that's a pretty tall mandate. Instead, what we say is you can wrap the infrastructure or application you're attempting to access with strong DM. This provides the ability to elevate and modernize the authentication and authorization stack for these critical elements in your infrastructure, whether they be applications or even mainframes, to ensure that you can be guaranteed that the policy that you have is actually being followed for access, and the policy that you have is as agile and flexible as you need to comply with ever-changing requirements and to comply with the security mandates that may come through. The exciting thing about this is we're not the only ones with this vision. What we see are folks like Gartner who are promoting the idea of an identity fabric. And the identity fabric really is about sharing signals and context among all of the different tools that may be present in an enterprise for access to any of the services that may be present in an enterprise from both humans and workloads. So the way to think about this is in today's environment, there are lots and lots of processes that are kicked off in an automated fashion that result in privilege access or privilege actions being performed in your infrastructure or in your applications. All of those should also share the set of risk signals and also have a continuous assessment of their authorization state, of their security state, of their compliance state before access is granted. So why has this vision not been uh, already adopted by enterprises? Because prior to uh, the solution that we're talking about today, this was not possible in the industry. There wasn't this concept of a continuous assessment of privileged users and their um, and the assessment of their environment beyond login, right? So it was a one-time effort, not a continuous effort. There wasn't the ability to do a risk assessment at a per action level. And there wasn't the ability to enforce this on existing infrastructure and applications without a wholesale rewrite. StrongDM solves all of these problems today. So how do we solve this? There's a trend that we're introducing, which is a move away from macro authorizations, all or nothing access to an environment, to more granular authorizations that we're calling micro authorizations, where we evaluate the context, we evaluate the actions that are about to be performed at every moment of that session. So you may be able to do a read on a table, but you may not be able to do a drop on a table. You may not be able to update the table. These are all additional authorizations that are required, additional entitlements that are required before you can proceed. So how do we do this? Essentially, we read in signals from both your identity provider, so whether it's Okta, Google Workspace, Azure Active Directory, virtually anything that supports SAML or OIDC. We read in signals from your security ecosystem, CrowdStrike, SentinelOne. We send data to your security ecosystem, whether it's Splunk or other SIEMs, and we use that to calculate a risk score and perform a continuous assessment of the risk at any given moment in time of what you're about to perform. This allows us to provide both secure connectivity as well as deep visibility and control of privileged user access to privileged systems, and more importantly, perform that continuous assessment of risk and continuous assessment of whether this action is something that the user is allowed to do at this moment in time. We don't live in a static world, and that dynamic assessment is really critical to having a strong security posture. So Gartner calls this a composable identity fabric. And one of the key aspects of that composable security fabric are these micro authorizations that we talked about. It also includes centralized policy management, integration with most of the common tools that are present in an enterprise, and then support for all of the things that are present in your tech stack, right? Um, Very few of us are privileged to live in a world where uh, we have no legacy systems. We have no systems that we've inherited from our predecessors 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And so a tool that you adopt must support not just the systems of today, but also all the systems that have come before you, and uh, allow you to easily elevate the security of those systems. So um, we do this with that zero trust approach. We do this by providing dynamic capabilities to allow the assessment of that risk. And then we allow you to adjust the authorization in real time on the fly if it's necessary to get your job done, and if it's necessary to, as long as you have the necessary authorization. Along the way, we record and provide audit trails for all of the actions that were performed. Super important in a world where audits are important, super important where you have to show, not just say that you have verifiable audit trails that are there. The additional capability is the capability to have fine-grained authorization. This is at a level of granularity that has not been possible today, but adopting modern authorization frameworks and incorporating them into the zero trust access strategy. One of our customers really encapsulated it, where he said, the PAM I need is Starback. I don't want to talk about RBAC. I don't want to talk about ABAC because depending on context, that can change. But Starback on key privileged actions. So we're moving from an era where it was all about access, where it was all or nothing access into systems, to an era where zero trust is the prevailing ethos, where you are looking and evaluating the action that an end user is performing at any given moment in time. You're evaluating that against the policy that has been set. You're evaluating that against the risk that is being assessed continuously, and then as necessary, triggering workflows. What we mean by workflows is the things that are necessary to authorize the entitlements for the user to perform that action. This can be as simple as I need to re-verify that you are who you say you are using MFA, to as complicated as I need to trigger this ServiceNow workflow that will trigger request to your manager, request trigger to compliance, request trigger request to the security admins. This is what's needed to provide the authorization. In this specific case, the customer was actually the CIO of a large firm that manages uh, literally billions of dollars. And what they said is, in our case, these are the three systems, actually three mailing lists that contain privileged information. Any access uh, for anybody into these mailing lists need to be controlled and authorized by me and the security officer. This is bringing that uh, dual key action from nuclear codes to the world of everyday privilege access, right? Because in their case, that's where they discussed who was being acquired, who was potentially being divested, and any of the key investments they were looking to make. So those three mailing lists were super critical for them. In your environment, it could be something completely different. The beauty of what we've built is we allow you to extend it to your environment and your use case just via policy. So we're entering an era which we consider zero trust for privileged users. It's really about being able to precisely and dynamically define via policy the actions that control who has access to what in your environment, what can they do with that access in your environment, and dynamically grant them and revoke that access as needed or as dictated by either your compliance or your security posture. The other key thing I want to highlight is what we call frustration-free access. One of the things we hear time and again is uh, an, a fantastic security tool that is so unusable that nobody uses it and everyone tries to figure a bypass is not something that flies. And that's really shelfware that sits in a lot of organizations gathering dust from the legacy PAM providers. The best compliment we've gotten is not just from the CISOs who have bought our solutions, but from their users, the VPs of engineering, the VPs of DevOps, who've come to us and found us at conferences, and they say, um, you're the unicorn that allowed us to both increase our security and increase the usability. My users are no longer stumbling around trying to find the right credential to access a particular environment. They authenticate as normal and they get access to the right systems when they need to get their work done. The other key thing is really about stopping unsanctioned actions. Um, the granularity of being able to control an action, not just provide unfettered all or nothing access, is something new and differentiated that we're introducing to the market via an integrated policy engine. Um, what we have done is integrated not just any policy engine, but one that is that AWS has released called Cedar, that is powering the next generation of identity and access management tools. Um, super performant, super secure, provides automated reasoning. We've implemented this in our system from scratch, and we're actually in the process of making this available in open source and contributing back to the community. But this allows us to provide that continuous assessment, continuous evaluation of policy, and um, without introducing any friction into that process. And the third key pillar that we deliver is really that continuous compliance. This is no longer about generating spreadsheets about how the system was configured. You can actually look at the system, look at the policies, and know at any given moment in time how that policy-based action, uh, what will happen with that policy-based action, how that policy-based action will allow your users to access or not access certain systems. And you get that real-time verifiable compliance using the foundation of zero trust as the base. Thank you so much. And I happy to take any questions via email or reach offline, and hope this was informative and useful for you folks.